Daf Nun Daled Amud Beis, right at the top of the Yomid. Ton Rabbanan, we learned in a Bryce, Shiva Dvarim Mechusim B'nei Adam. There's 7 things which are concealed from people. Elohein, these are the 7 things. Yomi Masechet, the day of a person's Misa, the day that he'll die. Person would know when the day of his Misa was. He would possibly put things off until later. Person doesn't know when the Yomi Masechet is, so he has to do tshuva every day because this might be the last day. The Yomi Nechama, the day that he has a Nechama, that he gets consoled, that he has a Nechama from it. That is also concealed. And the depth of the din. The Rashi has 2 pshatim. One is that to done, really the how to done, lemitoi, the oimek hadin, how to done, or the din in Shamayim that a person has, the oimek hadin, that how a person is judged in Shamayim. One person might be judged favorably, even though at the appearances in Olam Hazeh he would seem to be not as on the high madreg, or not as a big tzaddik as somebody else. In Shamayim he might be judged more favorably. So the oimek hadin, ve'ein adam yodei ma b'liba shel chavera. A person doesn't know what is in another person's mind, what he really thinks. Ve'ein adam yodei ma mistakir. He doesn't know exactly how he'll make a living, how he'll earn a profit. So, Pasha Pshat, you would learn the sayers that a person doesn't know exactly where he'll make his own profit, and therefore he has to engage in different things. He has to have the nisyonos of Parnasa. But it's mashma from the Marsha, from the Ben Yehoyada, that it's not talking necessarily about an individual, meaning in general. People don't know in advance, they don't know what business is necessarily going to be a profitable business. If they would, then everybody would be engaged in the same business, and people wouldn't do things that the world needs. If everybody would know, exactly that this is the business that will be successful, or this commodity will be the one that will go up in price, so everybody will rush and hoard those commodities, or only engage in those businesses, and the world wouldn't have a proper kiyum. And the other thing is Malchus based Dovid, Malchus Masay Taxar, when the Malchus based Dovid will return, Malchus Chayevas Masay Tichla, and when the Malchus Chayevas, the Malchus of Raimi, will perish. So we don't know, all these things are concealed, and therefore we have to constantly be mispalel for all of these things. So in Rabbanan there are 3 things that came to the Machshav, the Rebbeinu Shalom, to create during the Sheshes Mei Bereishis. They weren't in fact created until later, but the Machshava was that they should be created. V'im loyalu, and if the Rebbeinu Shalom didn't have the Machshava, dinu shialu, it would be proper that he did, because the world would not have been created, or a man could not have existed without them. What are these things? On the maize, that it should be decomposed. If not, people would keep the maize alive and never forget the maize. And that people should be able to forget the nifter. And on tfuah, that it would rot. If it wouldn't rot, then people could hoard the food indefinitely, and people could control all of the produce of the food, all the sustenance of the world. So there's a gzera that it should rot. And some say also that in currency that it should be acceptable. So what is the big mila currency that it's acceptable? Meaning because it's to facilitate commerce, to facilitate trade, and parnasa, you have to rely on currency. You can't barter. A world that could rely only on bartering and exchanging goods of value, the parnasa, the commerce, can't grow and can't prosper. And as the Ben Yoyona explains, that matbeya means that you're relying on a currency even though it doesn't necessarily have an intrinsic value. You exchange dollar bills, $100 bills. A $100 bill doesn't have an intrinsic value of $100. It's a piece of paper. It has a stamp on it. It has the paper, that a currency that people attribute value to it. So they attribute a value of that $100, even though it's a piece of paper. On a coin is minted. Now the coin doesn't necessarily have a value of the metal. It could be a metal that doesn't have real value, but it's minted and people attribute a value to it, and that allows the trade, allows currency to circulate, and which fosters business and commerce and parnasa. As far as doing work on Tisha B'Av, we're not talking about a malacha, about malachas like on Yom Tov and Shabbos. As far as working on Tisha B'Av, it's only in the minute. Therefore, Malkum Shanago Las Malacha Tisha B'Av Oisim, where the minute is to do it, you are allowed to. But Malkum Shanago Shaloi Lasois, but in a place where the Malkum Shaloi Lasois Malacha, when it's not to do work on Tisha B'Av, ain't Oisim, then you can't. Or Bechol Malkum, but in any place, in any event, Talmid Chachamim B'Telem, Talmid Chacham who always should have in mind the Churban Abayis and not be Masiach Das from the Churban Abayis, they should not do work. Roshim Ben Gamliel Oimer Lo'olam Yasa Adam Asma Talmid Chacham, a person should, in this regard, treat himself as a Talmid Chacham, even though in other matters he should not. It looks like Yehura, it looks like Gaiva, it looks like he's being haughty. But over this, that not to do work on Tisha B'Av, even though he's putting himself in the category of a Talmid Chacham, it's appropriate to do. Zok the Gemara Amar Shmuel, Ein Tanas Sibur B'Bovel, Ela Tisha B'Av Bilvad. It says in Bovel they did not have a Tanas Sibur, meaning in Eretz Yisrael they had, when they didn't have rains, they were geyser a series of fasts, Tanas Sibur, with increasing levels of chumras, and the last series had the greatest chumras. In Bovel, they didn't have these fasts. They weren't geyser these fasts, Rashi says, because they didn't need the rains in Bovel. The Ramban explains that only a bezin can be geyser those fasts. In Eretz Yisrael, they had a bezin of smuchim, and Chutz La'aretz they didn't, so they didn't have those fasts on Chutz La'aretz. Now, as we mentioned, these fasts have a chumras, more than other Tanis Tzibur. These fasts in Bovel, they didn't have these fasts in Bovel, and they didn't have the fast with these chumras, Ela Tisha B'Av Bilvad, except for Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av was naig in Bovel, and it also had chumras. So the Memra, I mean to say that Shmuel holds that the Savar Shmuel Tisha B'Av Bein Hashmasha Shaloi also, you mean to say that Tisha B'Av has these chumras, and meaning therefore even Bein Hashmashos, meaning the end of the day of the 8th of Av and the beginning of the 9th of Av, the twilight period where it's uncertain is it the 8th or the 9th of Av, still would be also to eat and work. So you mean to say that the Isser of and the fast would be noig there as well? I've Amar Shmuel Tisha B'Av Bein Hashmasha Shaloi Muter, but Shmuel says beferish that it's not so, that Tisha B'Av Bein Hashmasha is muter. The Chitayim, maybe you'll say, Kasavar Shmuel called Tanas Sibur Ben Hashmasha Shaloi Muter. Maybe you'll say that it's not a kasha because he holds by Tanas Sibur also, that in the case of the Tanas Sibur, the Ben Hashmasha is muter. Ivan Antanan, we learned in a Mishnah, it says that on the Erev of the fast, it says that only before, while it's still daylight, before the fast, while it's still daytime, so limuti mai, what does it come to exclude? Lavli muti, ben hashmasha isn't this coming to exclude ben hashmasha? It's only muti mi bayayim, but after it's day, meaning even in the twilight period, even ben hashmasha is also, where it says no, limuti mishachashecha, it means limuti mishachashecha, it's muti mi bayayim. At night, it's also, it's night from also, meaning the fast doesn't start only the next day, it starts even from the night beforehand. Name a Messiah. Let's say we can bring a riot to this because it says Ein bein Tisha B'av leYom Kippurim el shezeh sveika osur v'zeh sveika muter. There's no difference between them, except for a suffix that on Yom Kippur a suffix is also on Tisha B'av it's muter. My sveika muter. What does it mean that a suffix is muter lav bein hashmashos? Does it not mean the suffix period? At time of the period where the day is a suffix, it's a day or night, the twilight, the bein hashmashos. So doesn't that show you clearly that Tisha B'av bein hashmashos is muter? When it says loy kedam Rav Shisha, it's not right because you can say kedam Rav Shisha l'kviyah diyarcha. It means if we don't know when the day is, it's not clear when the day is. Is it the Tisha B'av or not? Is it Yom Kippur or not? So he said it over there, and as far as kviyah diyarcha, as far as when the day is, that it's a suffix if it's Yom Kippur or not. Here also we're doing a kviyah diyarcha, and what we're saying is that if it's not sure, if it's not clear, is it really Tisha B'av or not, then we say that it's muter, but it's not dealing with bein hashmashos. Dorish Rava, he said the following drasha: Uboras uminikas misanas mashlimis boy. He said that the Tisha B'av has a chumrah, it's chomor, and therefore even pregnant and nursing women, they have to fast and complete the fast on Tisha B'av. Kederach shemisanas mashlimis Yom Kippurim, just like they have to do on Yom Kippur. O bein hashmashos shaloi also. And he said, bein hashmashos is also v'chein amar mishmei Rav Yochanan. And they also said that in the name of Rav Yochanan, that bein hashmashos shaloi is also. That bein hashmashos also, as opposed to the previous opinion, they hold that it's also. The Achreinim asked the kasha, Tisha B'av is a derabanan. And normally we have a principle that's suffix rabbanan l'kula. So why should we say over here, according to this opinion, the bein hashmashos shaloi is also? That the bein hashmashos is also. Why should that be? And perhaps we can even strengthen the kasha because we learned, according to the pshat we said previously, that kviyah diyarcha, that as far as a suffix, if it's not clear, is it the 8th or 9th of Av, then we're mekel. Why should we be machmer over here? The Minchas Chinuch has a discussion. The Sas Emes says that what we mean to say over here is the bein hashmashos is also not because suffix l'chumra. He says if it's al suffix l'chumra, it's suffix d'rabbanan, you're mekel. You wouldn't be machmer. He says that the reason is that when the rabbanan were geyser Tisha B'av, they were geyser just like on Yom Kippur. There's a din of taisus Yom Kippurim that you have to add on to the day. The day has to be extended. He says by Tisha B'av also they extended the day. The day is extended. There's taisus Tisha B'av. So therefore, memela the bein hashmashos is also. It's also memela because you have to include this period of time because you have to add on to Tisha B'av. When they were geyser Tisha B'av, they were geyser Tisha B'av plus. Just like we have on Shabbos and Yom Tov, that you have to add on to the day. The day has to be extended. And the fast on Yom Kippur, also the way they were geyser on Tisha B'av is with taisus Tisha B'av. So in Mela you have to, the bein hashmashos period is also, not because of suffix l'chumra, because the Tisha B'av incorporates more than Tisha B'av. You have to add on, extend the day, and have taisus Tisha B'av as well. Did he say that the bein hashmashos is also? He says it's not like a Tana Sibur. My love, the bein hashmashos, isn't he referring to a bein hashmashos, that the Tana Sibur of the rains, that the bein hashmashos is also? Here it's muter. Where it says no, loy malacha. It means as far as working. It's not like the Tana Sibur where there is an Isser Malacha on Tisha B'av. They were not geyser an Isser of working of Malacha. Frank the Gemara, how can you say Malacha Tanina? Makam Shanago Las Malacha Batishba Vaisim, in a place where the minig is to do work, then you are allowed to do work. Makam Shanago Shaloi Lasas Ain Isim, and a place where that the minig is not to, you can't. So it's totally on a minig. There's no isser on it. Now, even Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, who says a person should always make himself like a Talmud Chacham, meaning and not work on Tisha B'Av, that doesn't mean that it's also. It just means is that he can be noyeg like the Talmud Chacham, and it doesn't look like Gaiva, and therefore he can treat himself as a Talmud Chacham. Aval Mesa loy also, but he didn't say it's also. It's totally on minig. So therefore, you can't say over here when he says that Tisha B'Av Eina Katana Sibur is in reference to Malacha, because we know that Malacha is not Aser. We know that Malacha, working, is totally dependent on the minig. Ella my Eina Katana Sibur, rather what it means Latfilas Nila, that on the rains, the fast for the rains, they were geyser that there's supposed to be an extra tefillah of Ne'ilah. And on Tisha B'Av, it's not like that. There's no tefillah of Ne'ilah. It says, what do you mean? If he wants to daven Ne'ilah, Rabbi Yochanan says that there's no bracha levatol on that. Tefillah, a person can daven, halvai, that he can daven, that he davens the whole day, meaning a person is capable of davening a tefillah's nedova. And therefore, he can daven, if he wants to daven Ne'ilah on Tisha B'Av, he can. Now, in halacha, it has to be that with certain guidelines and kavanas, etc. But essentially, maker then a person can daven and daven tefillas nedova. So he could daven tefillas Ne'ilah on Tisha B'Av if he wants to. The more answers, hasam chayv. Yes, but on the Tanas Tzibur, it's a chayv, it's an obligation. On Tisha B'Av, he doesn't have a chiyuv. He's not obligated. If it's a rishus, if he wants to, he can, but he's not obligated. The Gemara says, "My eina katanis sibur." What does it mean? La'esrim va'arba. It means for 24 brachos in Shmona Esrei. On the Tanas Sibur for the rains, they added on these extra brachos. And that applies only to there and not on Tisha B'Av. Rav Papa Omer, he says, "My eina katanis sibur." He says, "Eina karishenis elakachrenis va'asura." What he means is that Tisha B'Av is not like a tanis sibur. What he means to say is not like the first series of fasts for the rains. But what he means to say is, it is not like the first, it's like the last series. And it's not like the first series where it's mutter to eat at night. The Tanis only starts in the morning. Tisha B'Av is not like that. It's like the last series of fast where it's also even at night. Meisel ask you a kasha, ein bein Tisha B'Av Yomi Kippurim, el shezeh sveika oser, v'zeh sveika mutter. So it says clearly that the Tisha B'Av suffix is mutter. So what does it mean that the suffix is mutter? My sveika mutter. Doesn't that mean lav beinish matzah shaloi? Isn't that referring to suffix? Beinish matzah is twilight, and it says it's mutter. No, it means if it's uncertain, if it's not sure, if it's a suffix on the day, that we don't know when Bezin was kaveh the month, the new month, so we're not sure is today the 8th or the 9th of Av. So, well, that would imply that the only difference is suffix, but otherwise Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur are the same, they're equal. So, Messiah Rabbi Lazar, it's a right, Rabbi Lazar, Dom Rabbi Lazar, also La'Adam She'yoshit, Etzboi B'mayim B'Tisha B'Av Gederach, She'also Lo'yoshit, Etzboi B'Yom Kippurim. That just like bathing and washing is also on Yom Kippur, washing is also on Tisha B'Av, so he can't even put his finger into the water. It's also to put even to dip his finger in the water, just like on Yom Kippur. Meisel ask you a kasha, ain't bein Tisha B'Av L'tanis Tzibur ela shezeh aser b'asiyas malacha v'zeh muter b'asiyas malacha. B'makom shenagu, it says that the only difference between Tisha B'Av and Tanis Sibur is that the Tanis Sibur is also b'maloch, but on Tisha B'Av, where the minig is that it's mutter, it's mutter. There's no gzeira of Isra Malocha. It's totally on minig. And v'zeh mutter basis malocha b'makom shenagu halachol divreim zeh v'zeh shavim. So otherwise it says, otherwise it implies that they're equal, that Tisha B'Av and the Tanis Sibur are equal. V'ilagabe Tanis Sibur Tanya, we learn Geshamro Asar B'chitza Lo Yamra Elakol Gufa Aval Panav Yarav Ragav Loi. But as far as the Tanis Sibur, it's only the Isra is bathing, washing his whole body, but Panav Yarav Ragav, his face, his hands, his feet is mutter. Now here you're telling me that you can't even put your finger into the water on Tisha B'Av. And over here, it would seem to imply that Tisha B'Av is the same as the Tanis. The only difference is the Siyas Malacha, but otherwise they're the same. And on Tanis Sibur, part of Yadaragel is mutter, so it should be mutter on Tisha B'Av as well. Amar Papa, he says Tana Kula Kula Gatana. What the Tana is referring to is kulas. When he says Ein Bain, he's referring to a kula. So therefore, he said that they talk about a kula. He says Ein Bain Tisha B'Av Yom Kippurim, Ela Shazeh Sveika also Zeh Sveika Mutter, meaning that Tisha B'Av, the only kula is that the kula difference in the kula is that it is as far as Safek, and Ein Tisha B'Av Kala Tisha B'Av, and as far as the Tanis Sibur, Tisha B'Av, it doesn't have a kula of a Tanis Sibur, Ela Inyan, only as far as the Inyan of Malach is concerned. But it doesn't mean that they're equal in all respects. It's Tana Kula Kula Gatana. When it says that Tisha B'Av Ain't Bein Tisha B'Av Latana Sibur, when it says the only difference is Ella Linyan Malacha, what it means to say is the only kula that Tisha B'Av has over the Tanis Sibur is work. That by the Tanis Sibur it's also, and by Tisha B'Av it's totally in the minhag. But it doesn't mean they're equal in all respects. Now, Tisha B'Av could have a chumrah. Tisha B'Av has a chumrah that by Tanis Sibur it's only also bathed, washing only also called gufa. Part of Yarav Ragalov is mutter. Tisha B'Av, it's even that is also, even dipping your finger in. Meaning, when we say Ein Bain, we're not saying that they're equal in all respects. We're saying the only difference, the only kula that Tisha B'Av has over the Tanis Sibur is malacha. But there are other differences, and Tisha B'Av has a chumrah, and as far as washing, that is a case of a chumrah.